A Healer's Gift. Adventures of Broad. Book 1. Adventures on Broad. Written by Tao Wong. Narrated by Eric Martin. Chapter 25. Days after the not-so-subtle hinting by Elsa, Daniel finds himself standing outside the top, dressed comfortably in his only other pair of clean, non-adventuring clothing, waiting for Asen. He sighs, wishing for once she'd turn up on time for something other than a dungeon delve. Just as he thinks that, he spots her and Kyra walking together, chatting amiably. As he gets over his surprise at Asen's apparent talkativeness, he gets another one, as they close enough for him to hear the meows and growls that the two speak in. He didn't know Kyra spoke Catkin. "Kyra!" He gives a quick peck to the offered cheek, sliding a hand around her waist and quickly copping a quick feel. She rolls her eyes, but gives him a hug nonetheless, melding her body comfortably to his. "You didn't tell me you were coming." "Asen came by the clinic a few days ago to invite me." Kyra smiles, and Asen nods in confirmation. Pointing down the street, the Catkin heads down, the mixed-race trio garnering more than a few quick stares. Daniel ignores it, focusing on his companions. "Where are we going?" Daniel asks once again. Perhaps this time he'll get an actual answer. "Celebration, Annika," Asen replies in her usual terse manner. Daniel rolls his eyes and is suddenly glad of Kyra's presence. He shoots an imploring look at Kyra, who runs a hand through her hair, green eyes sparkling. "It's the Beastkin celebration for Annika, their first hero," Kyra says. "I believe today would mark the 497th anniversary for the founding of the city of Marlu by Annika, the first major step to the creation of Garhwa, and thus the first Beastkin nation." Daniel scratches his head and sighs, somewhat abashed at his lack of knowledge. Spending most of his time in the mines that were dominated by humans and the occasional dwarf, he had little knowledge of the other races. It just had never been part of his worldview till now. Asen does not lead them straight to the Beastkin district, though, instead stopping by a butcher first. Unlike many, the butcher seems more than happy to see Asen, as Asen is one of her most regular and best customers. Today's order was noteworthy even for the small carnivore, and Asen quickly drags Daniel over to help with the large sack. "This thing must weigh a good 80 pounds. What did you do, buy a whole pig?" Daniel grumbles as he lifts the sack. Asen's cheerful nod makes him groan again, but he stays silent as they continue the walk, Kyra regretfully detached from Daniel's arm now. They continue to journey through the streets of Karlak, Kyra, as always, smiling and nodding to those she recognizes. The elf garners more than one admiring glance as always, though most either dismiss Asen's presence or watch her extra carefully. After a time, the trio leave the normal thoroughfares that Daniel knows, the roads becoming narrower, buildings growing older and more run down, though still well-washed and well-kept. The transition is gradual at first, but as they step out from another alleyway, it's like walking into another city. The streets are filled with beastkin of all kinds, from arrogant wolfkin to stately catkin, grumbly jackals, lazy ursines, and more. As great a surprise for Daniel, however, are the riot of colors and smells that make up the streets. A wild divergence from humanity's boring pastels are the vibrant colors that the beastkin coat their dwellings in, yellows and greens and reds covering walls and wood trim, and even layered on roofs. For the celebration, strings of red and white flow from one side of the alley to the other, with trailing hand-painted scrolls depicting memorable scenes beneath. Food and other scents cling to the air, mixing with wild abandon and assaulting Daniel's senses, and he reels, wondering how the beastkin are able to handle all this. Even his human senses are overwhelmed. How do they handle it? By his side, both Asen and Kyra watch with amusement, treasuring the view as Daniel struggles to deal with the overload. When he finally recovers, Asen tugs on his hand and points, leading him to a cooking pit that has been set up in front of a shop where he is directed to set the pig. A rumbly, growly conversation ensues between Asen and the presiding cook, both getting more and more agitated. Daniel frowns, hairs prickling on the back of his neck, and he unconsciously reaches for his non-existent mace. Kyra reaches for and grabs his hand, pulling him close to whisper, "It's okay, they're just arguing about how to cook the meat. Beastkin are loud amongst themselves." Daniel grimaces and sighs, watching his normally quiet companion get into a shouting match. Unsure what to do, the two lovers stand and watch the scenes around them and ignore the arguing pair, Beastkin children streaming through the streets in a never-ending game of tag, miraculously dodging busy adults without fail. A large black catkin dressed in a garishly colored yellow tunic and blousy white pants strides up to the pair, hands splayed with paws facing the sky in greeting. He is a mixture of human and catkin traits, a feline angled face, but lacking the overabundance of fur that marks Asen's own visage. "Kyra and Daniel it must be. May you find safety at our fires." Kyra copies the hand greeting, and after a brief moment so does Daniel. She intones the ritual response as well. "Elder Chitan, may your fire burn forever safely." Unsure if he should repeat the message, Daniel just falls back on being silent. Elder Chitan turns to the young adventurer, black fur wrinkling in amusement before he speaks, only the slightest of growls marring his voice. "Thank you for coming, and thank you for taking care of my daughter." Daughter? Daniel catches on quickly enough and shakes his head. "We take care of each other. We're partners." The elder chuffs and continues. "Yes, it is good that she has found one who is willing to accept her. Asen has not had it easy, being closer to the progenitor than many other kin." Daniel's puzzled looks just has the elder explain, first stepping closer to allow himself to lower his voice. "It is strange. In Gahwa, she would be exalted. Here in Brad, we strive to be closer to you humans, and she is despised." Ears droop, the elder shrugs. "I love my daughter, but she could have made it easier on herself too. She is stubborn and prideful, much like her mother." Daniel smiles slightly, having noticed both aspects of his companion on more than one occasion. It could be frustrating at times to deal with, but so could he had been told. "Still, this is not the time for this. Come, you must drink some sabu and dance." The elder claps his paws together and drags the two off, growling out his intentions to his daughter, who just waves him away. The argument with that obstinate cook who wishes to use Wixley spice on her pig had to be completed. Wixley spice. Everyone knew you used gullen leaves and cracked esper spice to get the best taste from roast pig. The ensuing hours pass in laughter and amusement, the elder happy to pay host to the two guests. As the day progresses, Daniel notes that his and Kyra's presence are a notable exception, the Beastkin having the run of this neighborhood to themselves. That is, other than a loud, boisterous Tarek in a drinking competition with a bear, which neither seem ready to concede. Through the day, Daniel has food and drink stuffed into his hands continuously, meats of various types, such that even his own carnivorous nature is more than fulfilled. Only once is there silence, when the sun reaches its zenith. The Beastkin fall silent, staring to the sky, the silence lingering for minutes. At first, the growls are too low for Daniel to hear, though he can feel it in his bones as the voices of the assembled Beastkin surround him. Slowly, it goes higher and higher, the growls resolving into an animalistic song that tugs at a deeply hidden part of him. When the song is over, Daniel finds himself breathing heavily, as if from a long run, his face flushed and his eyes sparkling. A glance at Kyra shows that even the elven beauty is affected. The smoldering look she gives him makes him wonder briefly if he can find an empty room somewhere. Asen joins them soon after the ceremony and drags Daniel to a nearby warehouse where a small arena has been created. There, Beastkin challenge each other in various feats of athleticism. Once, even Daniel is dragged into the center to join in the feat of strength, though he is quickly outclassed by the massive Ursine and Buffalo Beastkin, who make up the majority of the contestants. It is Kyra who proves the surprise, laughingly dancing and stealing ribbons in the game of tag and agility that the catkin and snakes dominate otherwise. Eventually, even she is caught, but many of the Beastkin eye the elf with new respect. During a lull in the evening, Daniel finally manages to ask the question that has disturbed him all day. "Asen's very talkative, isn't she?" Yes, she is," Kyra answers. "So why doesn't she talk to me?" Daniel grumbles. "Do you talk to her in Beastkin?" "No," Daniel frowns. "She seems to understand me well." "Yes, dear," Kyra sighs, and touches his throat and then hers. "Now look at hers." Daniel does as she says, finally looking, and then slowly blinks, feeling ashamed. "She has trouble speaking, doesn't she?" "In broad? Yes." Daniel falls silent then, absently chewing on the rib he is given. He stops, grimacing, and puts the food down again as his stomach catches up to his hands. Way too much food. Kyra pushes his shoulder with her own, and he meets her eyes, where she just shakes her head slightly. Getting the message, he focuses on having fun. This is not the time for such thoughts. Smiling, he holds a hand out, and Kyra takes it, letting herself be pulled onto the dance floor again with a laugh. Chapter 26. "There you are!" Liev's sudden appearance makes the two adventurers jump, Asen making it halfway up the nearest wall, while Daniel drops into a crouch, shield up. They then both blink. After all, they're both on the 7th floor, working their way through a couple of ogres, and Liev had never been spotted anywhere close to the dungeon before. "Take my hand!" Daniel frowns, and Liev sighs, no longer asking, and reaching out to grab his hand and Asen's arm in short order. A surge of power takes them both out of the dungeon, directly into a room that neither have seen before. The two adventurers stare around themselves, dumbfounded, a window to the outside room indicating that they are in town and in the guild itself. "How?" Daniel says. "Group teleport. It's a level 50 adventurer's skill proficiency," Liev explains as he gestures to Daniel. "Come, you're needed." Daniel automatically follows, but stops short, Liev pointing to Asen, who has started to come too. "Your presence will be unhelpful, my dear. We go to see the champion. And don't give me that look, Daniel. We need your gift." Daniel wipes the mulish look off his face, grimacing and following after the fast-disappearing attendant. He frowns in thought, though, surprised to find that Liev was, or perhaps still is, a high-level adventurer. Liev certainly didn't have the bearing of a fighter. In fact, the thought of Liev holding a sword makes Daniel chuckle to himself internally, the bookish and fastidious red-haired older gentleman ignorant of Daniel's amusement. "The champion and his party were ambushed. Most died in the attack, and the champion himself is gravely injured. We need you to heal him, Daniel," Liev says. Daniel's initial amusement is wiped away at Liev's words as he struggles to catch up mentally. Liev turns, getting into Daniel's face and speaking emphatically. "Young man, I understand your position. I almost admire it. However, this is not the time or place. The orcs haven't sent a raiding party, they sent a war party. There are over 300 orcs rampaging through the province at this moment, and that man, for all his distasteful views, is the most powerful weapon we have. If he survives." Daniel gulps, the thought of 300 orcs laying waste to the countryside enough to force him to cast aside any personal feelings he had. While he was no healer, he understood their oath, to treat all that needed it, no matter their personal feelings. Daniel nods firmly, and in silence the pair hurry to the barracks where the champion lies injured. The sight that greets Daniel when he enters makes him pale. The champion, once a larger-than-life presence, is gravely hurt, multiple open wounds on his chest and limbs. Most dangerous of all was the distorted skull, pressure and shattered bones causing it to bulge out. For a moment, Daniel can just stare before he takes a deep, shuddering breath. A hand touches Daniel's, gripping tight, and he notices for the first time the presence of others in the room. The guard captain he knows by sight, Kyra, obviously, but the other three are unknown to him. The first seems to be another healer from the way he works on the champion's wounds, but the other two he is unable to guess. One is a portly human with a beard, the other a female with a thick gold chain around her neck. The chain clues him in on her at last. That was the Merchant Guild's seal on it. Kyra squeezes his hand again, bringing his attention back to her. "Can you heal him?" Daniel nods mutely, a part of him already assessing the damage and what he would need to do. The greater part of his mind, though, stalls at the cost of the healing, a cost that would dwarf anything he had done in years. Only once before had he attempted something this powerful, and in that case he had eventually failed. No gift could win against the ravages of time, not in the end. "Daniel." Kyra turns her lover's gaze to meet hers, concern etching her voice. "What's wrong?" "My gift." He struggles against his irrational fear of telling them, the fear that they will exploit him, what they will ask of him, force on him. His hand, entwined with hers, begins shaking violently. "What is the hold-up?" The portly human speaks imperiously, pointing. "Heal him, adventurer. I won't have the Baron's champion die in my city." Kyra turns to the man, shooting a glare that would have killed if it could. Liev steps in, holding a hand up. "My Lord Mayor, this space is no longer suitable for non-healers. I believe we should retire." "I'm the mayor." Snapping, the portly man begins to set himself when the woman leans over, whispering in his ear. He grunts and finally stumps out, followed closely by the woman and Liev. Just before she leaves, she casts an assessing glance at the pale Daniel, before turning away. The healer, after a glance at Kyra, moves to a corner, giving the two space. "Daniel, talk to me, please," Kyra implores him, holding both their hands up and placing a kiss on the top of his. Daniel draws a deep, shuddering breath, and then whispers softly, "When I use my gift, I lose a bit of myself, a bit of what I've learned, a bit of my memories, a bit of my skills, and some of my energy. The gift, it strips me of these things when I use it. It's normally not much, just a few minutes here or there, an hour or two sometimes. This, though," he shivers again, clutching her hand, "I could lose a lot more." Kyra's eyes widen, remembering all the times she blithely asked him to help her in the clinic, all the times he seemed a bit forgetful or slow afterwards, all the times he acceded without protest when he should have said no. You idiot!" "Yeah." Words said, he seems to relax a bit. "This has to happen, doesn't it?" Lips pursed, Kyra nods. "It does. The champion's another gifted. If he is able to use his gift, only a master mage or another gifted can challenge him on the field of battle." Daniel lets her hands go, walking past her to put his hands on the struggling champion. Almost plaintively, as he thrusts his gift into the man, "Couldn't he at least be a little nicer?" Kyra watches for a moment as Daniel begins, then turns, gesturing for the other healer to keep an eye on them. She has another place to be, words to be spoken. If what Daniel fears is true, he will lose much in this, and she intends to ensure he is well compensated for it. Focused, Daniel misses the byplay. His gift tells him all the details he needs, the punctured lung, the shredded intestines, the broken skull, and the ever-growing pressure in the head, barely relieved by other methods. A normal human being would have been dead a score over, only the champion's stupendous health and the magic used on him managing to keep him alive. Yet his health falls with each breath, and he will not last long without further healing. Damage assessed, Daniel begins the process of fixing things, plugging the most dangerous wounds first, healing and lowering the pressure in the champion's skull whilst bones shift back under the skin to the appropriate locations. Each pulse of power pulls another memory, another shudder through his body as his gift strips him of recently learned skills, of muscle and real memory. It is an uncaring taskmaster, removing both pleasant and unpleasant memories, caring not their origin. The champion's health works against Daniel now, muscles and organs that would be pliant and easy to heal in another being requiring more energy, more time, more experience from Daniel. What feels like hours, but is barely half of one, passes by before Daniel pulls his senses back into himself. He stumbles, collapsing into a thoughtfully positioned chair as the champion's breath eases. The champion's wounds are mostly healed, the majority fixed, and he no longer does injury to himself with every breath. Bruises and some cuts still lie across the champion's body, but Daniel knows he is no longer in danger. Regular magic healing or plain time will do the rest. Level lost. You are now a level 4 adventurer. Attribute points lost. That could have been worse. Daniel stares at the little sliver of experience he has left, keeping him from falling another level, and groans. So much experience, so much time lost. Months of hard work, stripped from him, his memory of recent dungeon delves and fights gone. His body aches from the use of the gift. His nerves and muscles feel stripped raw. However, the job is not done, and so he forces himself upright, placing his hand on the champion's chest and invoking his healing spell. He was so close to getting the option to learn a moderate heal the next time he received proficiency, so close to becoming more than he was before. Once more, he has been dragged down by his gift, and he can't help but feel a flare of resentment. Again, he forces down the anger and resentment, focusing on burning through his mana to finish the job. Later he'll deal with this. The last of his mana drained from him, Daniel turns away to leave. They can deal with the rest of this. All he wants is rest. As he steps aside, an iron grip grasps his arm. "You healed me," the champion rumbles, awake. "Yes," Daniel says, tugging at his arm. The champion releases him and stares at the youngster who dared defy him days ago. "Why?" "It was needed," Daniel begins, and falls silent. "And the cost?" Daniel hears the capitalization, understands what the champion asks. Another one, cursed, blessed with a gift at birth, understands all too well the cost incurred. It was no simple matter, no matter what the others thought. The champion's own gift allowed him to ignore any attack he chose to do so when invoked, but the price was paid in pain days later. The longer the gift was activated, the worse and longer the pain it inflicted. The payment could be put off, but not indefinitely. Daniel shakes his head, refusing to answer. He owes this man no answer. He owes him nothing more. Duty done, all Daniel wants is to be left alone now, and so he tugs again at the arm, the champion finally releasing him. Daniel walks away, leaving the champion to the care of the guard's healer. Behind him, the champion growls, displeased at being so casually dismissed once again. Damn the child. In another room, while Daniel works, a larger and more intense argument is happening. In that room, the mayor and the merchant guild master and Kyra face off over what Daniel's fee for the healing will be. Liev watches, taking no side in the argument directly, though he subtly helps by pointing out the rarity and exclusivity of Daniel's gift. It is only when the guard's healer arrives to announce the successful restoration of the champion that the argument finishes. Like all good negotiations, no single party leaves happy, but Kyra is grimly content at least. If the child would not value himself, then she would ensure that. Back in the top, in his room, alone, Daniel calls up his status screen to see how much he has lost in detail. Name: Daniel Chai. Class: Level 4 Adventurer, 2%. Subclasses: Level 7 Minor, 14%. Human, male. Statistics: Life, 201. Stamina, 201. Mana, 152. Attributes: Strength, 18. Agility, 19. Constitution, 26. Intelligence, 16. Willpower, 18. Luck, 13. Skills: Unarmed Combat, Level 3, 1 out of 100. Clubs, Level 8, 14 out of 100. Shield, Level 6, 28 out of 100. Dodge, Level 4, 36 out of 100. Combat Sense, Level 5, 48 out of 100. Perception, Level 5, 36 out of 100. Mining, Level 7, 78 out of 100. Healing, Level 8, 17 out of 100. Herb Lore, Level 3, 31 out of 100. Stealth, Level 2, 14 out of 100. Cooking, Level 2, 37 out of 100. Singing, Level 2, 14 out of 100. Skill Proficiencies: Double Strike, Shield Bash, Mapping, 2. Spells: Minor Healing, 1. Gifts: Martyr's Touch. The caster may heal oneself or others by touch and concentration, sacrificing a portion of his life to do so. Cost varies, depending on the extent of the injuries healed. Chapter 27. Asen, we have to do the 5th floor today, Daniel announces to his friend the next day. She stops from touching the gem that would bring them lower, tilting her head as she considers Daniel. He did seem weaker today. Perhaps his healing had drained him more than she thought. She chuffs out, slightly annoyed, but touches the 5th floor gemstone. Relieved that she will not inquire further, Daniel follows his friend down. It's time to see how much he has lost. 3 nests later, Daniel takes out his frustration on a single crawler that they have come across, slamming down again and again with his mace. So much lost. He's a step slower, a beat off, and while he feels he should be faster, he's not, and he knows why. Behind him, Asen watches with deep concern. Daniel's normal, calm, slightly amused but entirely engaged mode of adventuring is gone, replaced with a short, sullen ball of fury and resentment. On the other hand, as Daniel kicks the crawler away and moves on to the next cavern, he certainly is making up for the quality with quantity today. Grabbing the mana stone, Asen moves to keep up with her friend and ensure he doesn't walk into any traps. Well, if Daniel kept this up too long, she'll find a barrel of water and dump him in it. Till then, she is content to let him work his feelings out on the crawlers. In a room far above the dungeon, the titular leaders of the city of Karlak work out plans to deal with the rampaging war party. Daniel, a word? Liev is waiting for them when they finally surface from the dungeon. Daniel nods, moving to the side to allow Asen to handle the sale of their mana stones and other loot. Firstly, thank you. Liev does not stop, though, knowing the young adventurer was uncomfortable with thanks. Secondly, there has been a general request for adventurers to join the army as ancillary troops due to the war party. I have taken the liberty of assigning you and Asen to Maximilian's team as melee fighters. I believe that is where your particular skills will be most useful. Daniel frowns, and Liev sighs, explaining, Doing so ensures you are not conscripted as a healer if the number of volunteers is deemed insufficient. In addition, it will be good experience for you, young man. Brod does not have to keep a large standing army because it relies on its adventurers to provide additional troops when necessary. If you intend to progress as an adventurer, you will find that such requests become more and more common. This particular event is as safe as any general army-sponsored quest will be." "Yes, sir," Daniel finally agrees. He is still not certain joining the army was a great option for him, but if Liev felt it was the right thing to do, he would accede to the man's request. The attendant had yet to steer him wrong. "Lastly, you are going to be very popular among your peers in short order. Word of your gift has finally reached their ears after yesterday's incident." Liev hesitates and falls silent, leaving any additional advice unspoken. Truthfully, Liev had done as much as he could. Getting the young man out of town under the watchful eye of a friend ensured that those who would use him just for his gift had no target, at least for the short term. In the meantime, he and Kyra would work on making his return as uncomplicated as possible. Seeing no other conversational threads cropping up, Daniel wishes Liev goodbye and returns to Asen. He quickly informs her of their new quest, to which she replies, "Pay?" Daniel pauses, realizing he never did ask that. Asen lets out an annoyed chuff, slinking back to talk with Liev directly, grumbling all the while about how lucky Daniel was that he was such a good distraction for her. Finding a comfortable corner, Daniel settles down to wait, knowing Asen will more than handle matters for both of them. He had spent the day fighting, going from one nest to the next, and now he was drained, all his anger and regret smashed apart like the crawlers he had met. When Asen is done and has provided him with the details of their pay, he thanks her, and they part ways, Asen to spend an evening with family, and Daniel to the top. At the top, Daniel is startled to see Kyra waiting for him, chatting amiably with Elise. Kyra sends a smile his way, walking over to kiss him before wrinkling her nose at his smell. "I was thinking dinner, but I think a bath would be better," Kyra says, and points upwards. "Hurry up, I'll be waiting." Daniel nods dumbly, deciding that it is best to go with the flow here. He did need a bath after all, or at least a wash. A quick trip upstairs to get a bar of soap and a change of clothing is all that is needed before he returns, Kyra taking his arm as they bid farewell. The walk to the bathing room is short and pleasant, the two quickly catching each other up on their day's activities. "Now Leon comes in with this barb in his foot, about 2 inches sticking right out of it, and he's sitting there, dripping blood in the waiting room, and every time we go to get him in, he sends another patient in," Kyra continues, shaking her head. "I eventually had to do the damn operation right there in the room and push it out in front of everyone. That big baby was so scared of it coming out he nearly died of blood loss." Daniel laughs at her words, holding the door open for Kyra as they enter the bathtub. Both experienced hands, they deposit a silver coin each for their personal use, and then Kyra deposits another 3 silver to get them a private room. When Daniel moves to protest, he is quelled by the smoldering look Kyra offers him. A silly grin crosses his face as they head in, first to their respective sexes' changing rooms before they make their way to the marked private room. Daniel is surprised to see Kyra in first, lounging in the circular wooden bath that is large enough to fit 4 in it. Steam comes from the hot water, a pair of small ladles, and even soap set aside for their use. As he nears the tub, he realizes that she is naked under the water. "I hadn't brought a change of clothing," she says in answer to his look. Daniel grins, sliding in with her. Before he can move to get a kiss, she points to the soap, and he sighs, getting to scrubbing. As he moves to clean his back, she moves over and takes it up, scrubbing at his back. "Liev tells me that you'll be joining the army tomorrow," Kyra says. "Yeah, he said it's good for me. I never really considered it, you know," Daniel says. "Liev is somewhat traditional in his thinking. Not all adventurers take as much part in the army quests as he did, or thinks most should do. I rarely did. Kyra says, smiling and splashing his back before pushing back. Daniel turns around, ducking under the water to get the last of the soap out of his eyes before he lies back, enjoying the heat as it releases his muscles. Oh, that's nice. Smiling as she watches him, Kyra sighs and swims over, sliding between his legs and straddling him. When his eyes open, she puts a finger to his lips and murmurs, "Daniel, focus. I wanted to tell you, be careful about the quests you take. Most are, well, normal, but some might not sit well with you. Army quests aren't like your normal quests. You can't take one and then leave it just because you don't like how it works out or the information wasn't complete. You have to finish Army quests or face their censure." Daniel pauses, staring into her eyes, and then nods slowly. "Okay, I'll be careful." Kyra smiles, and then kisses him before murmuring, "Good. Now we've got this room for another hour. Let's make the most of it." The next morning, Asen and Daniel exit to meet up with their army in the clear fields north of Karlak. Already, the first few divisions of the army have gathered, their supply train pulling in behind them. In contrast to the orderly lineup of the army divisions, the adventurers mill around in loose groups, individuals occasionally breaking off to chat with other groups. The two friends glance around, feeling somewhat out of place. There are few Beastkin in the group, clustered together in small clumps. For the first time, Daniel realizes how little interaction he has had with the general adventuring population of the town of Karlak. Even the regulars he sees at the top often receive little more than a nod. His own free time was mostly taken up by Kyra, the clinic, or training, with the occasional night drinking with the guard thrown in. Unlike most adventurers, his social circle were the town residents. As the two stand around awkwardly, a tall, blond swordsman walks up to them, clad in plate mail. He smiles as he nears, showing off perfect teeth on top of a chiseled jaw, and Daniel feels a sudden twinge of jealousy. "Daniel? Asen?" Receiving confirmation from both, the swordsman offers his hand. "Maximilian, you'll be in my party for this." Daniel shakes it, impressed by the casual strength he feels through the handshake. Obviously, all those muscles were not just for show. Asen chuffs a greeting as well, eyeing the surroundings with casual interest. "Come on, I'll introduce you to the rest of the group." Maximilian leads them through the crowd, offering quick nods and greetings as he walks through, the man's presence obviously well known. It takes them a short while to wind their way to their own party, as there are nearly 100 adventurers gathered already. Daniel feels somewhat impressed, never realizing there were this many in the town. Most are outfitted like he is, with varying degrees of protection for armor and weaponry, the vast majority being melee fighters. Only a small portion seem to be carrying a visible ranged weapon, and of those, crossbows seem to be the most popular option. "Daniel, Asen, this is Kilroy and Mia. Mia's a ranger and is our main ranged weapon dealer. Kilroy's Kilroy," Maximilian says. "Have you shot a crossbow before, Daniel?" Daniel shakes his head, glancing at the weapon that Max holds out to him. "No problem. We'll head down the way and get you familiar with it. It's simple compared to the bow, so you should pick it up easily. We'll all be using a ranged weapon, other than Asen for obvious reasons, and the crossbows and Mia's bow will be our first line of offense." Daniel nods, hefting the crossbow and following along. He voices one hesitation first, though. "Don't we have to join the army?" "There's no need right now. It'll take them forever to get moving, and we'll catch up once we're done training," Maximilian says, gesturing for them to catch up. Daniel repeats quietly in his head the instructions he's been given. Exhale, remember to adjust for the wind and drop, pull gently on the trigger, and feels the jerk as the crossbow bolt releases, flying to the target. Breath held, he watches the arrow arc through the air and miss once again, this time by 5 meters. I think you're getting worse, Maximilian says with awe. Worse, chuffs Asen before going back to cleaning her paw. I'm sorry, Daniel sighs, dejected. He reaches for another bolt and realizes he's shot them all. A glance to the side shows that the others are done for now, so he calls out his intention of retrieving the bolts, hurrying to do so. 4 hours of training, and he hasn't managed to hit the stump a bare 20 meters away even once. When he returns, Maximilian shakes his head as Daniel begins to load the crossbow. No time, we need to get going. We'll have you carry the crossbow and reload for Kilroy instead. Daniel looks away, shame filling him. A hand claps on his shoulder, Maximilian waiting for Daniel to look up before speaking. It's okay. Not everyone can be good at everything. Now come on. We've got a bit of a hike before we're caught up.